Thank you.
We have the recording in progress, so I'll send you the materials after the event and the link to the recording so you can download it. But nice to see you again, Professor Souren. I'll use the formal in front of you.
No, no, just call me Souren. Just call me Souren.
We usually are pretty informal in industry side, but I know sometimes
No,
with
no,
students
no, we
and
are fine.
academics, it's more formal. But anyway, yeah, happy to discuss organization learning. And Nina, back to you now that we're recording.
Yeah, thank you so much. And so great to hear that you've had interactions with March. We've been reading his papers for so long. So yeah, so as I was telling, organization learning. So basically, we're looking at what are those policies, processes, or technologies. How are these things enabling organizations to learn better, so that they continuously improve and basically develop capacity to transform themselves whenever it is required. And some of the dimensions, as I said, people, process, and technology, but it just to kind of make it more granular, we look at how do organizations promote through the culture that they develop in organizations. How do they encourage collaboration? How do they empower people to kind of take a collective action? How do they in many cases, how do they measure how their organization is learning? And then how do they enable this organization learning across these networks that they have with customers, vendors, etc. So I've just given you an overview of what we'll be talking, but I'll wait for others to introduce, and then I'll start with the questions.
Sangeeta, Ravi.
Okay. Yeah. Hello, Jim. So nice to meet you. It's really pleasure to see you. And my name is Sangeeta Garg, and I'm actually part of TCS. I'm looking after the Industry Academia collaboration from the TCS research. Really glad to see.
Ravi.
Yeah. Hi, Jim. This is Ravi Mahamuni. I am part of TCS Research, heading the Design Research Lab at TCS Research and looking into the overall service experience design and how we can really bring the experiences for the employees, for the customers, and like that. So, yeah, nice to know. Thank you.
Great.
Okay, so then I'll start with the questions. And these questions, when you answer, it can be based upon your or your experience in any of the organizations that you've worked earlier. So yeah, so the very first question is, if you can just tell us about your experiences that you've had in organization, what kind of organization and what kind of roles that you've had.
Sure. So I've had experiences in small startups. I actually did an AI startup in the 1970s doing mathematical models of language that Exxon acquired. So I've had that startup experience. Um, then I've worked for universities as a visiting professor at University of Rome in Italy. So I've experienced that university work. When I got my doctoral program, I got to, my undergrad at MIT and my graduate work in computer science at Yale, I got to experience big universities. Um, then Apple, when I was at Apple in the 90s, that was kind of a medium-sized company. Now, of course, it's a huge giant. At the time, it was medium size. Then I went to work for IBM, which is a giant. When I was working for them, 300,000 people worldwide in every country. So we had across all industries. So that was a good experience. And now that I'm retired, I'm mostly working with small nonprofit organizations that have, you know, um, maybe 10 super active people and 100 kind of medium active people, and then maybe 1,000 participants. So definitely on the small side. Um, and we're currently doing a project. In fact, that's why I was a few minutes late. I was like typing up some information on our processes. I'll just share my screen so you can see what I was working on. This is, we're working on a guidebook for the organization where we for all the service roles. And, like when you plan a single event and run a single event and celebrate a single event part one, celebrate a single event part two, this is all of the steps, including uploading recordings from Zoom and giving digital badges, and how do you do an event series. And then if you look at the so that's like a simplified version of the organization's learning, and you have to translate those words into real practice and people. And then the actual complexity is a document that's more like this, where we actually onboarded a volunteer, and you can see this volunteer is running our quarterly welcome meetings for new members of ISIP, this nonprofit. And you can see, it's got templates and instructions, and she's converting these words into things that she does every quarter. So I'll just put a link to isip.org in the chat. But yeah, I would say I've experienced lots of different types of organizations, all the way from startups to giants. And now we're looking at like small nonprofit. How do we augment the people in those nonprofits with generative AI, and how do we automate the micro tasks that they're doing? So that's what I've experienced so far in my career.
Yeah, amazing. Thank you so much for giving a kind of a very good overview. Now, again, before I go to very specific questions, what is your current view on how do organizations learn? And if it'll be great if you can focus on if you've seen differences during this whole experience that you talked about. So you can start from the beginning, and then if you can talk about, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, early on, I guess, it's just a question of, you got some skills, you're put in a new organization, you use those skills, you develop practices. You don't really think about the whole organization when you're a young entrant into an organization. But as my career progressed, I got more and more senior leadership roles where I started hiring people and running groups of hundreds of people and talking to the CEOs regularly. And then you start taking a more holistic view of the organization. And probably the most profound time was when I was working with the Linda Sanford, who was the CIO of IBM at the time. And we were developing our service research area, and we were trying to come up with a model for organizational learning. That's when I met with James March at Stanford. And we really took that model of exploitation and exploration to I think, a higher level at IBM with the help of James March. We actually divided it not into just exploitation and exploration. We called it run, transform, and innovate. And run was just the part of the business that was very routine, did it over and over and over again. Maybe you try to optimize it, increase the usage of technology every year incrementally to just take the things that are routine, the habits of the organization, and just automate, get them as efficient as possible. Then that was the run part. Then the transform part was where we looked around for best practices. So organizations like APQC, where you're just constantly looking around, seeing, oh, who's the best in this process, who's the best in that process, and then you would transform your business to adopt those processes. And that's quite a bit of work to do transformation. And there's a human element to it that makes it really challenging. And also that transform part, whenever we did big acquisitions at IBM, transforming their culture to match our culture, we wrote several books on that topic. And finally, there's innovate. And innovate is where, you're saying, maybe there's new things you've got to do in the future. So you're not just doing the routine things of the past. There's new opportunities. You got to innovate. So there's new service innovations that you're coming up with, new types of processes. So that run, transform, and innovate is very much how we looked at it from a business perspective. But recently, there's also, you know, and we were starting to get into this at IBM when we were moving towards smarter planet and smarter cities. There is this idea that maybe run, transform, innovate is okay for businesses when you're trying to transform a business where, it's bottom line kind of oriented. But when you start thinking about transforming society and cities where there's like, it's more than a business, it's really, you have to be careful how you transform things when you start, doing it at a societal level. And for that, I think, we came across, I'm just going to put a link to something in the chat here. One of my mentors at Apple was Alan Kay. And I don't know if you've heard of Alan Kay or not, but he was the inventor of the Dynabook, first personal computer. And he's really looked at, let me just put these links to his work in the chat. I like how he looks at it more from a culture perspective, and we did a lot of work in culture, but I think Alan's talk here, it's only about 30 minutes long, maybe an hour. I put that link in there to his YouTube and to his Wikipedia page. There you have to, and there's a lot of other books I could point you at. I'm just going to give you one more that I think is really important as you think about the societal transformation, not just the business transformation, organizational learning at a societal level. There's a book that was written in 2015. It's called Geek Heresy, Rescuing Social Change from the Cult of Technology by Kentaro Toyama, who's one of the best writers I've ever come across. And in that book, he talks about heart, mind, and will. And the heart part is also in Alan Kay's stuff, that you really have to, when you're doing societal organizational change, even in business these days, a big part of it is employee engagement. How do you get employees to really be engaged? I mean, one approach is you make them part owners, you give them more shares of the company. But there's another part of engagement that's more like, are we doing good stuff? Are we doing it in a good way? Are we part of the evil empire that's destroying the planet, or are we part of something that's really trying to make the world a better place? So there is that heart, mind, and will employee engagement that I think is, especially in the AI era, there's a lot more mindfulness about those types of issues. So I would say probably the biggest change I've seen over my career, if I was talking to James March today about this, we'd probably be talking about employee engagement and societal transformation and more the heart, mind, will kind of transformation rather than just the mechanistic, automate kind of old IBM approach to oh, let's take all the accounting and put it on the mainframe. That was okay for the 60s, but it's not okay for today. Today, you have to be much more circumspect about employee engagement, keeping employees' morale high, and making sure the mission is sustainable for society and not just a quick buck.
Okay, yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah.
Actually, we've heard this, the initial part of it, when you were talking about. So we did hear somebody else also talking about sustainable learning and disruptive learning, something which kind of, because of the technologies which are changing. So my next question would be, so organizations have been in an environment where technologies have not changed that frequently, in comparison to what is happening for last 10 years, probably, where every second day we hear about something new, Gen AI coming up, and then with that, lots and lots of application. And even organizations are kind of uncertain of how much to ask people to learn, and they are resource constrained. They can either ask them to work for the business, or to kind of, they have to optimize on amount of learning that we should allow people to do. So do you have a view on that, or based on your experience, that how should organizations kind of or not only organizations, basically how does technology, uh, what does technology change things about learning? Does it constrain learning in some way, or does it enable learning in some way? Yeah, you're on mute, so.
Yeah, I think my particular view on this is, and it's changing day to day. I mean, my view is changing day to day as I see um, things that aren't working, and I see things that maybe are working a little bit better, and I hear about approaches that seem more uh, realistic and practical, and ones that seem more idealistic and maybe impractical. Um, there's this is really where I don't think we know the future. I think we stumble into it and we invent it, and sometimes bad things happen and sometimes good things happen, because certainly technology can always be used by bad actors for bad purposes or good actors for good purposes. So as we become overly reliant on technology, we see both of those. But I think maybe the best thing I can say about this is, yes, there is accelerating change. Yes, it is harder for people to keep up. They have to invest more of their time in keeping up, and I have you know keeping up with accelerating change is really the I'll share. Let me see what I can share on this topic. Yeah, maybe here. Okay, this is a talk I just gave a couple days ago. Actually last week, I guess. So keeping up with accelerating change is really the big is really a big issue. And let's see here, which do I want? Mhm. Yeah, it really is the big issue, is keeping up with accelerating change. And I'm just trying to find that one. Maybe it was that one. Oh, here it is. Yeah, this is a talk I recently gave. I think the big issue is, this right here. So how do I keep up with accelerating change? I follow people. So there's about 30 people I follow: the doers, the knowers, the optimists, the realists. And there are some people who are really, really good at not only learning quickly, but sharing what they learn. So, like there's the neuron guys right here, these two guys right in the middle, the neuron. They have like a daily newsletter that's really, really good. This guy, he comes out with, or Ethan Mollick is another important person. If you're not following Ethan Mollick, he comes out with weekly stuff from UPenn on keeping up with accelerating change. But I guess, we're all having to invest more of our time in learning because the pace is increasing. So James March would say, exploration. We're spending more of our resources on exploration and less on exploiting the knowledge that we have. And that's pretty typical. But where do I see it going is something that I'm still formulating. And for that, I would say there's two technologies that I'm paying close attention to. One is the digital twins. And I don't know if you've seen the digital twin of Reid Hoffman. and the other is the humanoid robots. Those are very, very transformative technologies that might help us keep up with accelerating change. I'm actually building a digital twin of me. And let me see if I can find what I'm looking for here. This is important. Why is there accelerating change? Well, it's because the cost of computation is approaching, the marginal cost of computing and everything is going to zero thanks to NVIDIA and other companies like that. So we have to learn how to invest wisely in keeping up with all this change. And the reason I'm building a digital twin of myself is I've looked at things like, our speaking rate, about 100 to 150 words per minute. Writing an essay, we can only do about 10 to 20 words a minute. So we have to become smarter, and we have to keep up with accelerating change. It looks like there's some patterns here that we could exploit, but I think ultimately it's going to come down to our digital twins. And let me explain what I mean by that. So if we look at our digital twins, where's my digital twin? Yeah, this is my digital twin here. Right now, what my digital twin can do is it can take my papers and give a talk on my behalf and answer questions. And it can do it in English and French and Chinese and, all these different languages. Some I speak, like English and French and Italian, but some I don't, like Chinese. But my digital twin can speak in those languages. So let's say, you, instead of doing what we're doing right now, which is kind of slow, and you would have your digital twin ask my digital twin all these questions in advance. And my digital twin and your digital twin would interact, and maybe they would have like 1,000 versions of this conversation. and you would put in some criteria. You'd say, like, I really want to make it'll be good. The good answers for me are when there's these aspects to it. And then, you'll be like watching a speeded up version of this conversation, but just the best ones. And that'll be like a rehearsal for this meeting. And you'll send me, here's the conversations we had with your digital twin, Jim, that we thought were the best ones. Do you agree with what your digital twin said? Just put a thumbs up when you agree on these 5 or 6 points, and I'll look at it and say, yep, yep, yep. Oh no, this one was like, I don't know where that came from. That was wrong. But I'd never say that. And then we'd actually have the real conversation, but it would be based on this rehearsal where we've actually communicated much more clearly with each other. So the big question becomes, if we've got our digital twins to do this rehearsal, to prepare for things, that's using the marginal cost of computing going to zero to accelerate our learning from each other. That's good. But then how do your digital twin is getting smarter and smarter and smarter because it can read everything in different languages, and it can have these conversations with you. But the physical you in your brain here, it's not keeping up with the digital you. The digital you is like zooming off into the future, and you're kind of like poking along at human pace. So that's really where I would say I'm still, I don't like the Neuralink approach where we upload it all to our brains. Although obviously some people, some billionaires think that's how we're going to keep up. And, there's a lot to be said for that merger of a new species that evolves out of the human machine hybrid. I'm not so keen on that. I'm not particularly fond of that vision, although I think it will happen. I think, there are people who like that, who want to have, this kind of strange machine-like immortality. And so there will be people who go down that road. I don't plan on going down that road. I think it's not for me. But I do think there is this and this is where it comes back to organizational learning, is the reasons we have organizations in the first place are because an organization can know more than an individual. So somehow, by being in the right culture and in the right community, um, there will be a possibility for organizations to become millions and billions of times smarter than they are right now. And for the individuals who aren't necessarily, implanted, they're not the new species version. They're kind of like the old species. There's still like lots of room for the humanity to um, improve itself. And I think this is where you get into that Alan Kay video that you need to watch, where you'll see how he describes it in terms of technology advancing very, very rapidly, but our ability to use it wisely, not so much. I mean, the technology is improving faster than our wisdom for using it. And then he talks about the wisdom part moving much more slowly. And so I'm kind of like, I'm interested in that wisdom part, like Alan Kay. He was my mentor at Apple while I was there. And so and he talks about Doug Engelbart, another one of my mentors, along with James March. So I'm more like, I think the thing that's going to help humanity the most is if we can figure out that wisdom part. And technology will certainly help us figure out the wisdom part, but there may be bad things that happen if the bad actors use the technology for what they think is the right direction, maybe this hybrid species thing. Um, I'm not worried about like AI super intelligence or anything like that. I'm worried about unwise humans with very, very too much money and too much power. And maybe organizations that have too much money and too much power as well. So those are the threats I see. And I know this is a long answer, but yeah, I don't have it figured out. I'm investing in the wisdom part. That's where I personally think I can make, in my few years that I have left, I can still make a contribution maybe in that space. So long answer, very
Thank you.
philosophical, but that's
No,
how I
it,
spend my time.
yeah.
I'm retired, so I get to be philosophical about these things.
Yeah, it definitely helps us to get a philosophical view also of how things are changing. So the next question, again, see, we've heard from a few people where they are saying, so two things. I'll probably first ask about knowledge sharing. So what we've heard is because a lot of content is available for people to learn on their own. Hence, what is happening is knowledge sharing, which was the focus of organizations for very long, knowledge repository, having communities of practice, that seems to be getting thinner because
Hmm.
people think that there is a lot of information available for them. When they want, they will go through that. So knowledge sharing getting thinner in the presence of these abundance of information that is available to people. Do you have a view on this? I mean, what is your view on
Yeah,
this?
yeah, absolutely. This is it used to be, you'd be inside IBM and you'd be learning more from your IBM colleagues than externally, but now you can learn more, there's more of a balance. Yeah, you still learn a lot from your IBM colleagues, but you can learn, there's the whole world, and I think Bill Joy used to say the smartest, no matter how much you try to attract the best talent inside your organization, there's always smarter people outside the organization than inside your organization. And it's just, the world we live in. So yeah, I think you have to follow these influencers who are outside your organization. But internally, the politics of your organization is still very, very important. So you have to build those relationships. You have to, have your internal um, power alliances and mentoring alliances and learning alliances and all of that. So I would say, both are important. Both have always been important, but now it's clear that for keeping up, at least with the technological part, you really have to spend a lot more time looking outside your organization than inside your organization for keeping up with the technological part.
Okay, thanks. I'll hold on because I see the time. We are pretty close to the time also. So I'll hold on to see if somebody else has a question to ask, and I'll continue with my questions later if we have time.
Okay.
Sangeeta or Ravi or Professor. If nobody, then I can continue. I have too
So
many
I have,
questions.
so I have one question. So because Jim talked about the AI and the role of AI and his digital twin also. So in light of this AI evolution, and now every company, every employee really wants to use the Gen AI, make use of that. So how now the organizational learning will change in light of this AI generation? So I would like to actually understand your view on this.
Um, yeah, let me put this into the chat. Okay, so this is for your amusement if you want to go out and look at the YouTubes of my digital twin and read some of my articles about digital twins. But yeah, I think the way it's going to change is that we need to uh, rethink the organization, pretty fundamentally. And the way I view it, and uh, I can send you a copy if you connect with me on LinkedIn. I'll send you a copy of the last book, AI in the Service Era. But the way I see it is the IBM twin of you. There'll be a digital twin of, every university. Every city will have a digital twin. So given that there's going to be these AI digital twins of all of these entities, and these digital twins will have internal mental model digital twins of all the entities they interact with. So I'll have a digital twin of each of you, and it'll be like my private model of you. And you'll have your model of you, but I'll have my model of you. And so, what does that mean? That means I can ask quote unquote stupid questions that I might not ask you in real life because, oh my gosh, that's too stupid. But I can ask my digital twin version of you that question. And depending on the response I get back, I will be able to say, okay, now I know a better way to ask that question where it won't embarrass me and it won't embarrass you, and we can work on this thing together in a collaborative way. But that's the world I think we need to get to is, okay, so let's look at the polarization in politics. And ISIP has a meeting coming up actually in about an hour on AI and democracy. But the reason, why do you have polarization? Okay, that's a pretty fundamental question, and I haven't seen this answer, but to me it's obvious. And I tell people, oh, it's obvious why you have polarization, because you can't make decisions on your own. It's too complex. The world got too complex. So you rely on Republican or Democrat or conservative or liberal, and you let your party do your thinking for you. Well, guess what? That leads to polarization. Just naturally, it leads, when you cannot think for yourself well enough, you have to trust mommy or daddy. You get polarization. So it's obvious why we have polarization. And it's, of course, social media, and all this new stuff to learn just makes it even worse. Unless you can think for yourself, you're in trouble. You're going to get polarization. So how do we think for ourselves? Enter the digital twins. The digital twins have our values and have models of everybody. So with our digital twins, we could actually go to a model where we vote not as our parties would vote, but as we would vote on a million things a day. And this is how democracy gets saved. And this is how we start thinking for ourselves again, is because we've got our digital twins and we can monitor our digital twins and say, okay, no, that's not how I think. Or the digital twin would say, well, why did you do this and this and this then if you don't think like that? And you say, well, interesting. And you start learning about yourself and you start learning about your values and you start learning to think for yourself again. And once we can think for ourselves again, with the help of our digital twins, of course, then we have not this two-party system, this polarization. We actually have, again, a billion little lights in the world. And we have a billion thinkers for themselves. And they're not just thinking according to their party. They can be nuanced. They can be like, I'm kind of a Republican when it comes to fiscal conservative, but I'm kind of more of a Democrat when it comes to, this kind of stuff. And so this high dimensional representation of ourselves, which we get back to that high dimensional representation of ourselves and each other, and an ability to have a conversation with, an enemy even. But because your digital twin is having the conversation with their digital twin and your mental model of their digital twin, it's actually removing the emotional kind of, I got to be right every second, to this model of, okay, it's just learning about each other. And I can see, oh, that's where you are in this high dimensional space. We do have this common ground over here, but we differ over here because of this fundamental value difference between us that, we don't, there's no resolution there. But then maybe over in some other part of the world, there's entities like us that have that dispute and they found a resolution. And then we can share that resolution, and then suddenly we can communicate better because now we have a resolution to that fundamental thing. So I'm seeing, and thank you for that question, Ravi, because I think that's where it's going. And that's where wisdom is going to start appearing, is we're going to realize wisdom isn't just like steamrolling people into this or that category. It's appreciating their full high dimensionality and using that high dimensionality to actually get deeper answers, wiser answers to questions, rather than just take simplistic, these 32 things I have to believe because I'm a Republican, or these 32 things I have to believe because I'm a Democrat. No, I can pick and choose on the menu and be uniquely Jim and have my arguments about why I prefer each of these. And that's not just but the organization is not just like, I'm an organization in a way, but IBM is an organization, and the university is an organization, and the city is an organization, and the country is an organization. So we'll have digital twins of all of these entities. I even, in this presentation, just to show you how much fun you can have with this concept, and I don't know, some people may think this is fun, and other people may say, oh, that's silly, but I don't think it's silly. I think it's actually kind of the where it's going. Is I had one of my service science colleagues in New Zealand. When he saw my digital twin, he was like, whoa, I just saw your digital twin on YouTube. That's so cool. I was just reading about this thing I call it my strangest use case. So a service science colleague in New Zealand asked, the strangest use case so far. He said, in New Zealand, we're trying to give this mountain legal personhood. And I said, oh yeah, well, we can build a digital twin of that mountain. Sure. Okay. So I just used my AI and I built my digital twin, and then I started asking questions of this mountain. I said, how old are you? And what have you witnessed in your lifetime? What wisdom or lessons can you share with humanity? And do you feel and how do you feel about being granted legal personhood? And I got answers. Now, I told my friend, I said, run these by your indigenous people of New Zealand and tell me what they think of these answers. And at least to his view, it was like, oh, this is useful. Now we're starting to have conversations, not just with, individual people, but whole organizations, and even, that mountain isn't just that mountain. That mountain the historical people who lived there. And so I think this is where we start getting into these high dimensional representations. This is this is the next, it's not just when you watch the Alan Kay thing, it's not just us telling stories to each other around a campfire anymore, pushing words at each other. We are actually going to have very high dimensional representations of every concept. And we're going to be able to appreciate those nuances of these high dimensional representations of all the entities around us. And that's a different world. That's like, that's beyond the printing press. That's
Thank you.
beyond the internet. This is like communication at a vastly different scale than any kind of communication we've been. It's not just like you able to read the entire Library of Congress, every book that's ever been published. I'm talking beyond that. That's the kind of wisdom that we'll get to if we can build this digital twin representation of everyone and every organization and really explore that space and use it for good, not bad. A lot of ifs, but that's where I see it going. Yeah.
Thanks, Jim. I think it's very thought provoking. I think it will keep us thinking about it for a long time. Thank you.
All right, make it real. Build your digital twin step by step.
Sure.
No,
Okay.
Gutenberg
Jim,
had to
it's
start somewhere.
really it's really great. And
Yeah.
Nina possibly may have a few more questions, but let me just say something. The concept of digital twin that you are discussing here is absolutely fascinating, and it is helping us in my understanding to enrich our wisdom, extend our wisdom, and this interaction and the reflection um, uh, that is being facilitated by this digital twin. But I also like the point that you mentioned is the multidimensionality, and trying to understand and absorb multidimensionality is the key thing in the present world. Now, related to this is a work on which Alan Dennis and I are working, and we have
Right.
a paper on review, not on digital twin. Alan has published on digital twin very recently in one of our top journals, but this is on culture. And our work on culture basically considers this multidimensionality of cultural dimensions. And what we are saying that modern human beings do not necessarily follow one national culture, one organizational culture, one demographic culture. What they have in their mind is a cultural mosaic. We have multiple tiles of different cultures being activated, just like you said, on some issues. My Indian national culture gets activated. On some other issue, my innovative organizational culture gets activated. On some other issue, my long-term orientation of the Western culture gets activated. So it is a multi-dimensional nature of culture that we are proposing in a paper that is under review now. Now, the question here is, how will digital twin absorb the culture that we have? That needs possibly more discussion, but we can discuss on a separate meeting if you have time. And how will digital twin first try to, they can become twins of ourselves, but I have a multidimensionality of culture in me. And how will the digital twin, replicate that? That is one thing that maybe, if you have time, I would like to discuss with you in future. And that plays also a major role in org learning. Because org learning, a significant part of org learning, as you have mentioned in one of your references, is the culture part.
Yeah. Look at Marvin Minsky's Society of Mind. Each of us, our minds, his view was each of our minds is a society of
Yeah.
minds. And
Yeah.
because in ourselves, we have models of everybody we interact with. So even though both of my parents have passed away, I have my mom and I have my dad inside me. And sometimes when I'm looking at things, I'm thinking, oh, what would dad do? What would mom do? You know, what would my uncle do? So yeah, I think this idea that every every I call them service system entities, because service science, we looked at service system entities, how we give entities that give and get service and grow as a result of giving and getting service. And so inside every entity is the digital twin of all of the entities they interact with. So we have a mental model of everybody we interact with. So in some sense, that's our society of our mind. Our experience with others has caused us to enrich our models of the other. There's the self and there is the other. And to reach a wiser state, we have to look for um, how do we continue to grow together. And again, I mean, I can just give you books and books and books that I've read that describe, like Robert Wright, Non-Zero, The Logic of Human Destiny. It's about playing better win-win games with each other. And so, because win-win helps us both. So as we look for win-win, we can grow the number of types of interactions that we have better than if we do win-lose. And this is in Alan Kay's talk as well. He says, okay, this isn't going to end well if we just take conflict of for me to succeed, you have to fail. That's like old, unwise thinking. Wisdom thinking is, okay, maybe we don't know the win-win today, but let's keep working on it. We'll find a win-win. And that's where, when we do find that win-win, we'll both be better off. And that's what service science is based on. So yeah, send me your stuff. I'll happy to read it. I'm retired, so I'm not like I'm not as fast as I used to be. I don't have as much time as I used to have, but because I'm spending more time with my family. But
Sure.
yeah, send me some stuff. I spend a few hours every morning reading and writing and thinking. So if when the time is right, we can find more time.
Yeah.
Well, I've got to go. I appreciate. I'll send you the
Thank,
link to this recording.
Thank
Yeah,
you so
thank
bye
you.
much.
for now.
Thank you,
Thank
Jim.
you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
So much.
Thanks
Thank
a
you
lot.
so much, Jim.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Now.
Bye.